On Monday, April 3rd, the WEforum group is bringing my next guest in, Elaine Taylor-Klaus. It'll be at the Forrestdale Middle School in Rumson, a free community conversation. Elaine is the founder of Impact Parents. Elaine, good morning and welcome here to the Jersey Magazine.
Thank you. Great to be here.
So I believe one of the topics that you're going to be talking about is helping parents help kids. And boy, could I have used this about 15, 20 years ago.
Yeah, I could too. I am here now because what I needed wasn't there when my kids were young and I needed it. Right? So here we are.
They don't come with instruction manuals. We often hear that said about kids, but I understand that you've actually trying to change that and you've written a book about it.
I did write a book about it. I struggled without the instruction manual for about a decade. And I think my kids suffered a little bit as a result. And when I discovered the world of coaching, which is kind of where I come from, I discovered a different way of supporting kids and being in relationship with my own kids and ultimately with my husband and everybody else in my world, because it was a more kind of positive, empowering, encouraging way of being. And when you have complex kids, and I have complex kids, and I think these days we're raising kids in complex times. So on some level, everybody's a complex kid.
What's your definition of a complex kid?
It used to be kids who in some way struggle with life, learning, behavior, or any combination of the above. But as I say, I think that in the era of COVID, we're all dealing with so much uncertainty and so much complexity that it's become complicated for everybody. There are different layers of how we deal with things. And learning to navigate uncertainty has become the one constant in our life in a lot of ways. And the tools that I learned as a coach, and now I teach to parents and professionals and educators and everybody, is how to use those coaching skills to really navigate uncertainty in a way that leaves people feeling more confident and less lost and chaotic.
You mentioned how complex these times are, and I have three kids ranging in age from 33 to 22. And one of the things that I'd like to impress upon them is how much history repeats and the cycles that we go through. And, we're watching a lot of different things go on in this country right now without getting into any of the politics of it, but from racial unrest to political, this side versus that side, and there's nobody in the middle, it seems. And I take them back to what happened, the Cuban Missile Crisis. I was very small, but at one point we were doing nuclear bomb drills in my elementary school, saying Hail Marys in the hall, covering our heads. You go from the Cuban Missile Crisis, you have a president who's been assassinated, his brother is assassinated, a civil rights leader, Martin Luther King, is assassinated, the Vietnam War. I mean, all of this stuff is going on. And my son particularly, because he's roughly the same age that I was as some of that was happening. And I'm looking and he said, Dad, you're right. This is
it's the same thing.
How did we ever get through all that?
Yeah. Well, and I think that it's you can go back 30 years, you can go back 60 years, you can go back 100 years. We do learn from our mistakes and from life, and it does get better. And what I try to impress upon all the young adults in my life is that I know that you think it's terrible, and can you look at how much better it is now than it was 50 years ago when I was a kid, and look at how much progress we have made. Look at the conversations we are having about race and gender, and the conversations that we couldn't have when I was their age. So there is growth and progress, and we want to keep kind of cascading forward. And part of the way we do that is to find, for lack of a better word, acceptance in where we are and allow ourselves to be with whatever it is that's happening and learn that we have the capacity to dance with that uncertainty. I often say what I want for the people in my realm is to have what I call a bring it on attitude. Right? Like, bring it on. I got this. Whatever's coming at me, I'm going to keep swinging, and I know how to swing. And I think one of the things we learned when COVID started was the capacity to say to our kids, I don't know what's going to happen, but I trust that we can handle it. And that's what I think we need to learn to be with is, I don't know what's going to happen. I can't predict it, and that's okay. I don't need to control it in order to be with it and dance with it.
And what's one of the things that you hear the most from parents asking you questions when you do something like what you're doing on April 3rd here in New Jersey? What's some of the most oft asked questions by parents?
The number one term I hear from parents is, I'm desperate. I'm desperate. And it could be a million things. I'm desperate to get my kid to do their homework. I'm desperate to get them to follow my direction. I'm to get up in the morning, to go to school, to whatever. But the word desperate shows up all the time. And I counter that with talking about the difference between desperation and inspiration. When we're desperate, they're going to feel desperate. And it kind of, you create a tone of desperation that's not very productive. And when we shift into a place of inspiration as a parent or as a professional working with kids, or professional working with our team, whatever capacity you happen to be in, when we are inspired to see what's possible and to feel confident in our capacity to deal with it, the people we work with will feel that as well. So it's shifting from desperation to inspiration, I think, is a big part of what this is really about.
Elaine Taylor-Klaus, my guest this morning on the Jersey Magazine here at 105.5 WDH, one of the co-founders of a group called Impact Parents. Tell our listeners about that, Elaine.
So we're a virtual resource. We've been virtual for about 12 years, so long before the rest of you joined the virtual world. And we provide training, coaching, and support to parents and professionals and adults working with complex kids. And also we do a lot of neurodiversity training for the professional world in terms of understanding neurodiversity and how do we work with it and learn to navigate it in the workplace as well.
You know, in talking about complex kids, a lot of things come up like ADHD and autism and different learning disabilities. In your opinion, from what you've learned, are we just learning more about this now so we're able to diagnose better? Or is there an increase in all of this going on?
There's a little bit of both, but mostly what we know about the brain now versus what we knew 30 years ago is shocking, how much more advanced we are in understanding it. People with autism have been around for 50 years, but we didn't really know that 30 years ago or 20 years ago. And actually, we couldn't really diagnose both ADHD and autism until 2013. So we're only 10 years into this new realm. So I do think that a lot of it is about recognizing it and understanding it. And, we live in a distraction-driven world with cell phones and supercomputers in our pockets, and that has contributed to enhancing what you might say symptoms. So it's not that it didn't exist, but some of these issues you're describing are only diagnosed when they become a problem, when they interfere with someone's ability to be successful. And so, 40 years ago, you might not have been so challenged with the brain that I have now. And so I might have gone under the radar when I was a kid. But now, because there's so many more expectations and there's so much information coming at me as an adult, it shows up as a diagnosis in a way that it might not have. So it's not that it wasn't there. It's just the world has changed around it as well.
In addition to radio, I coach baseball and I deal with the kids of a wide variety of ages, from 7 all the way through high school, and in some cases even beyond that. And one of the things that gets me is parents are very reluctant to tell me if their child is on some kind of medication for something or other. And I can't tell you, Elaine, how many times in the aftermath of it, like I'll find out a year after I've finished working with the child, oh, by the way, and I'm not trained, to pick up, to diagnose or anything. But in one instance, there was a boy who was autistic, and I was never told by the parents. I found out from a relative, again, afterwards. I'm like, oh my God, there were so many different things I could have done had the mom or the dad only said, Coach, come here, I need to tell you about my child.
So I'm so glad you brought this up. So what happens is parents take the position, I don't want to label my child, or I don't want to give them an excuse. Those are the two primary reasons a parent doesn't disclose. But But what happens is if we don't give our kids an explanation for what they're struggling with, what they're going to make up about themselves is a whole lot worse. And they're going to make up that they're lazy, crazy, or stupid. And the adults around them are going to treat them like they're lazy, crazy, stupid, or rude and disrespectful. And none of that is true. When we as the adults can understand what's going on with these kids, and when these kids can learn to understand what's going on with themselves, without shame, without judgment, without embarrassment, then they can learn to manage themselves. That's the beauty of understanding neurodiversity or neurodivergence or neurospicy or whatever you want to call it. The beauty of it is that the goal is to give people the awareness and the information they need to learn to navigate the world in a way that works for them. And we can help them do that if we acknowledge it without shame.
Elaine Taylor-Klaus, my guest on the Jersey Magazine here at 105.5 WDHA, one of the co-founders of Impact Parents, and coming here to New Jersey in Rumson on Monday, April 3rd, sponsored by the WEforum group. Through dealing with complex kids and talking to parents and writing books and what have you and speaking, what have you learned about yourself?
Everything. I've learned, my husband is also coach now, and he would say probably the biggest thing that he's learned is not to take himself so damn seriously. And I may not have absorbed that lesson quite as well as he has, but I think what I would say for me is what I've learned is that I can't control what happens, but I can control how I respond to what happens. And I can have a lot of influence on the people around me when I pay attention to how I respond.
We try to communicate that as a baseball coach to our players of all ages. You can't control what the umpire does. You can't control this. You can't control that. But you certainly can control your reaction to it. And that's a great life lesson on the field and off.
And the distinction I would make is between reaction and respond, right? So in the coaching realm, the problem is we tend to react. And what we want to do is shift into a more conscious way of responding and influencing the world around us. And that comes with improving the way we communicate largely.
Elaine, for parents and DHA listeners who want to learn more about Impact Parents, where do they go?
You can go to impactparents.com and I'll do /Rumson. And that way you can come visit us in Rumson. You'll get some information there. You can sign up to join us. It's a free event that we're doing there. And we'll give you some other, good parenting guides and tips and stuff from there as well.
And again, the date on the Rumson event is Monday, April 3rd. It's the WeForum group. You can find them at weforumgroup.org. They're bringing in Elaine Taylor-Klaus at the Forrestdale Middle School in Rumson. So we're looking forward to that. Elaine, thank you so much for your time this morning. I've enjoyed speaking with you here on WDHA.
You as well. Thanks for having me.